Early in the 20th century, Devil's Lake, North Dakota once was close to drying up. Since 1993, the lake's water levels have been on the rise. Geography professor Paul Todhunter is here to discuss the new hazards of the rising water levels. Thank you for joining us today.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much. So why would you consider Devil's Lake a natural hazard?
Well, it's a type of lake environment or lake system that is prone to natural fluctuations in water level very quickly and to great extent. And the lake levels have historically varied in that region over the last 10,000 years, and right now they're really on the upswing, and look like it'll be doing that for a while, and that's created lots of problems.
It just keeps going up and up, so the rising levels are just going to go.
Yeah.
Describe the research that you've been conducting.
Well, I've had a student that looked at some of the flooding at Minnewacan using a program that FEMA uses to assess and map flood hazard. She did that for the thesis. I've got a couple graduate students looking at some of the climate history of the area and trying to figure out what's driving the lake level rise. I've played with doing different things about the lake for the last 15 years, and it's just been an interesting topic to look at.
So we are now in a regional wet cycle. What has caused this regional wet cycle that has caused the lake to rise?
Well, it's just due to natural climate fluctuations that are a part of this environment. There are some lake paleolimnologists, is the term, that do good work, and they have studied this area, lakes in this area, and what they find is that over the last 5,000 years there is no average level to these lakes. They constantly are going up and down and up and down, and so constant fluctuation is the norm for this area, and the lakes are just responding. We're in an upcycle right now.
So could you describe the shape of Devil's Lake? Is there anything special about them, or what is causing this?
Well, it's a very long lake system. It's almost 60 miles from one end to the other. It was caused by glaciers forming and moving over what we call an aquifer, a water-bearing body, and when that glacier moved over the water-bearing body, it just carved out this, scooped out this massive depression. And that's what the lake is. It's a feature created by the glacier.
Okay, right now there's a graphic up on the screen from May of 1992, and that was before the regional wet cycle started and the expansion started.
Right.
Now we're heading to May of 2010, and you can see there's a big difference between the two. How much in terms of water volume are we looking at in change?
Well, it's been tremendous. The lake has risen about 29 feet since those two images.
Wow.
The lake area has gone from about 44,000 acres to 161,000 acres. That's almost a fourfold increase. And the volume of water in the lake has gone from 570,000 acre feet to 3 million acre feet. So the volume has increased almost 5.5 times.
Wow. So it just over less than 20 years has expanded tremendously.
Yeah.
What is your prediction for the lake?
Well, you know, people have missed a lot of predictions on this lake. People would have thought that it already would have ended its wet cycle. So, you know, as a climatologist, I'd say it's going to continue to be wet until it starts to be dry, and people need to plan accordingly. You know, we really don't know when a wet cycle will end until it's ended. It's like a bull in a bear market. You know, when you're in it, you don't know when it's going to end.
It's all very unpredictable.
Yeah.
It's what's going to happen is when it's going to happen. Do other researchers fall within your predictions, or is there other ideas of what might happen?
Well, I think the Weather Service and some of the local people are predicting that this wet cycle will probably continue for several more years, and that's going to be really tough on the community and the region.
Why is there a change in the rising levels this year in particular?
Well, what happens when an area gets wet, it tends to produce more runoff. You know, the soil can absorb a lot of moisture, so when soil is dry, it can absorb a lot of snowmelt and rain, and it doesn't produce as much runoff. But when you're really in a wet period like this, the soil's very wet to begin with, and it has very little capacity to absorb new moisture, new snowmelt. And there's a lot of snow out there. It's going to melt. It's not much of it's going to go into the soil, and it's going to be just pouring out of that upper basin into the lake. They're predicting 600,000 acre feet of water to come into the basin, into the lake from the upper basin just this spring and summer, which is incredible.
That's incredible. What is the best option for this flood situation? What do you think would be the best option?
To go into a dry cycle.
Other than that, just go right into a dry cycle so we can just hope for the best, right?
That happened in the Great Salt Lake in Utah. It was a disaster also. It was rising. They built a multi-million-dollar pump system, and as soon as they got it complete, they went into a dry cycle, and they never used the pump system.
Hopefully that can happen for us, okay?
That would be the best scenario.
Thank you so much for joining us today.